very special year for Meerlust, the home of the iconic Rubicon Red Blend, because 1975, 50 years ago, the very first wines were produced. But the history of this farm goes way beyond that, and it's that history that is every bit as fascinating as the wine stories that have emerged over the last half century. And so today, Dan Really Likes Wine is on location at Meerlust to head up into the vineyards with Wim Truter, the cellar master, and to sit with the great Hannes Myburgh and find out exactly what it is that makes Meerlust quite so majestic. Oh, that all interviews should start just like this. A glass of wine, but not a glass of any wine. A glass of wine that's older than me, which obviously makes it significant. This is a 50-year-old glass of wine from Meerlust, the iconic South African estate that is half a century old as a brand in 2025, and is having one almighty celebration as a result, not just around the world, but occasionally when people like me drop in back home at HQ. And it gives me an enormous amount of pleasure, Hannes, to be spending time with someone who looks, in fairness, like he could have just walked out of a Parisian cafe and off to his latest exhibition. And I know art's a big part of your life. This is such a special year, and we were up in Johannesburg not that long ago, and you were speaking about the history of Meerlust and about your family. And aside from some wonderful stories and anecdotes, what really gripped me about that evening was just how much the occasion and the story and Meerlust does mean to you, and understandably so, but it really did shine through.
Good. It was quite an emotional day for us, you know. The first of our stops, we started in Johannesburg, then we went to New York and to London, and then in September we'll be doing a bash at Meerlust on the 8th of September to celebrate.
And all of that is to pay homage to this remarkable 50 years that you've had. Let's go back to 1975 and to all of this coming together. What is the origin story of Meerlust?
My dad,
You know, should I start right at the beginning?
Take us back.
Right, you know, it's 1652, the Dutch arrived at the Cape. 1693, the manor house at Meerlust was built already. So it's a very old farm. The farm is the total farm is a national monument nowadays. And my family bought Meerlust in 1756. And we've been there ever since, you know, through thick and through thin as well. And in 1975, my dad started, you know, he was already supplying co-ops with grapes from Meerlust. But you know, he was a very good and he was exceptionally good farmer. And he thought, well, you know, why sell my grapes? Why can't we just put them all into our own bottle? And in 1975, that's what he did. With our first Cabernet Sauvignon, 1975. That was 50 years ago.
The sense of almost responsibility that you have now with this, because this has gone beyond just being Hannes and his family's wine, beyond just being Wim's wine. This is South Africa's wine. So many people have Meerlust as part of their wine fabric. It's an incredible honour, I'd imagine, to have.
So, yes, it is a huge honour. And it also, you know, I think, Danny, people hold on to institutions like this. You know, it makes you feel good. If you go to a restaurant that your family used to go to, and you know the guy at the door, you know, it becomes an institution. And I think Meerlust has been able to become a bit of an institution in our wine industry, which is a nice thing to be.
For many South Africans, the word Rubicon has got two key resonances. One is one of the great political speeches of modern times, and the other is everybody's favourite wine. Why Rubicon? Why was that name settled on?
My dad and Georgia, when they were, you know, doing the alchemy of the Rubicon, what should they do? They met with a lot of adversity because it was a change of direction in the red wine industry, and people didn't like it. You know, it was out of the comfort zone, they moved out of the comfort zone. And if you had to establish a new vineyard of Merlot and Cabernet Franc, which a lot of people never even heard of, It's a long-term decision, and it's, takes a lot of time out of your farming time. Wine producer or winemaker has maybe 40 years in his life or her lifetime to make wine, so you can't waste time. So there was a lot of headwind during that time because people didn't like it, and it was likened to the story of Julius Caesar when the headwinds he had to come against when he crossed the River Rubicon in 49 BC.
You've been enormously generous here together with Wim in opening a wine that is older than me, and we had this conversation just before we started filming, and that was the appreciation of wine of this age. Is it the single greatest glass of wine on its own I have ever drunk? No, it's not. But when I drink something that I know has got this much history to it,
there's historic wine.
It is, and if it's making me feel alive, I can only imagine what it does for you.
Yeah, and I'm sad today to think that my dad didn't see this, that he didn't live. He died when he was 64, So anyway, we're doing pretty well at the moment, and we're looking forward with our team, and we're looking forward to our celebration in September or during the Cape Wine.
And the catch-up has been remarkably quick, certainly in my opinion. And it's got us to a stage where in 2025, we're celebrating this half century of a great South African brand. But I suspect there is still much, much more to come. And I'd like to find out about that. But before I do that, I'm going to head out into the vineyards. Wim has promised to show me around and give me a look at some of the grapes, and that will give you time to finish off the bottle of 75.
Perfect. And you're able to speak to her when you get back.
Well, when I do come back, we'll find out what lies in store.
Okay.
Here we go. 1975 Cabernet Sauvignon from Meerlust. This is an absolute treat. I shall put it down reluctantly. Next stop, the vineyards. So history lesson complete with Professor Hannes out into the vineyards and the man who makes sure that these translate. I got to be honest, I've got goosebumps being out here, Wim, because I've been drinking Meerlust Rubicon since the age of 8 or 9, and it's always been one of those wines where even as I've got more and more involved in the wine industry, I still feel a surge of excitement because it's not just great wine, which it is, but it is such an important part of this wine story. And I wonder, when you had that first conversation with Hannes about possibly coming to be the next custodian of Meerlust, aside from the excitement of the opportunity, how terrifying it was that now Meerlust Rubicon is up to you to continue the legacy of.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think what's really stood out in this past couple of years is that I probably haven't met a single person at a tasting that hasn't come up with my Meerlust story. It's like I had it at an anniversary or a gift, or it's part of a wedding celebration or a specific special date. And I think it's a wine that has such a personal, emotional connection with so many people. And it really is, that's this wine that's come with generations of wine drinkers. And I think it's become so iconic, not just in South Africa, internationally, that it is really there's a sense of responsibility, I think, with myself and with the team that, there's very high standards obviously set by our predecessors, and, we need to maintain. And I think everything we're doing now is just to ensure that the best Rubicons are still to come.
Now you come in, it's kind of like, right, you're on a slot, you've been given Liverpool to take over from a rather successful predecessor. Not just that, but also, okay, here's a wine that people know so well, but by the same token, you've been brought in because you are masterful at what you do. So striking that balance between, here is my understanding, interpretation of a great wine, while at the same time ensuring that this army of fans around the world doesn't start sticking pins in Vim dolls and throwing darts at pictures of you.
Yeah, I think we set with this challenge of how do you keep an historic brand relevant, and I think within that there's a lot of innovation and a lot of activity that happens behind the scenes when we look at what we're doing now with replantings and soils and handling in the cellar. But overall, I think though we are sitting in a very unique site. And I think where we're standing now, we're on this slope where we're overlooking, which is essentially the backbone of the Rubicon Vineyards. We're 5 kilometers from False Bay, so it's nice and cloudy today, but in the peak of summer, you have that cool ocean breeze that comes in. So it's a very unique growing condition, and I think that is still the overarching theme, and that what shapes the vines and the wines that are made here. And I think that balance and elegance and restraint that's been such a golden thread, I think that runs through sort of decades of Rubicon, is really brought about by this very unique site. And I think that's part of our work, is just to make sure that we keep on expressing that and do that with purity and real intensity. Yeah. Your area looks like.
The downside of being so super successful with one wine is that sometimes the others sit in the shadow a little, and that is the fate that that the Merlot and the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir sometimes suffer from, which is a pity because they are in their own rights terrific wines as well, and they sometimes surprise people because Chardonnay, yes, okay, we see a fair amount of very good Chardonnay in Stellenbosch, but you shouldn't be making Pinot Noir in Stellenbosch, surely. And yet as we stand here, we can see the sea, we can feel the breeze coming in. You mentioned Burgundy in approach, but there also seems to be a little to that of sight as well that affords you to make a varietal that is not traditionally having a home here in Stellenbosch.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we make decisions, when we plant plots and we do vineyard developments, I mean, Rubicon is still the aim. I mean, that is the main focus. Quite often we'll have people say, listen, I know Rubicon, like Meerlust, I'm not so sure about Meerlust, but Rubicon stands out. But I do think with Pinot, it's quite unique, and I think it really sort of helps tell the Rubicon story in a sense, because we see this ocean influence. A lot of it during the peak of the summer growing season is there's a lot of moisture-laden air that comes in, so actually slightly lower UV irradiation in the site. We actually have, on average, warmer temperatures on the farm, so it's actually not a cool site. Our big advantage is we spend probably the least amount of time above 35 degrees Celsius and warmer. So that ripening curve is a lot more gentle. You don't have those sugars running away. And on a variety like Pinot, early ripening variety, that's quite critical. So we get to a point where we get really lovely flavor development on Pinot Noir, and it's still nice and fresh and crunchy and vibrant.
If Pinot Noir from Stellenbosch, if Pinot Noir from Meerlust is catching you by surprise, well, do yourself a favour and go and find some. You'll discover an absolute joy. But I am here to drink loads of great Rubicon, so I'm going to head over to the vines, bottle in hand, and try some alongside the master. We're standing in vines that form part of this Meerlust Rubicon story. The view is terrific, but the view is kind of peripheral in terms of making the actual wine. It's what's in these vineyards that gives you the platform for this wine each and every year. What is it about where we are, about these vineyards, that was able to combine into a wine that really has become a South African calling card all over the world?
So we're actually standing in the block of Merlot. The block's about 18 years old. Merlot is really a variety, I think, that really finds a home on this estate. It loves the even ripening period that we have, again, with the ocean. The other half, obviously, is Cabernet Sauvignon. That sort of forms the backbone. We've got some Cabernet planted just a little bit down from where we are now. And we also have some Cabernet planted on the portion of Greywack. And I think it's that dark fruit intensity. But I think one thing that stands out for me about the Meerlust wines over decade is that balance and elegance. I think it's two elements that they never go out of style, they never follow any fads. It's just that true identity of that slight austerity, beautiful elegance, length and focus. And I think it's just what this area brings to the wine.
It reminds me of a conversation I had recently with Mike Radcliffe, where he was speaking about the perception of his Villafonte wines versus the reality. And because it's this big luxury wine, people are expecting this blockbuster. They're expecting something that is quite loud and noisy and has this massive presence. And there's actually quite a lot more restraint to the wine than people imagine. And I think that's the same with the Rubicon as well, because it's got this incredible name, because it is this Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo of the wine world. You're expecting something something that's going to come with this huge impact, and yet actually when you drink it, there is a lot more elegance and a lot more aristocratic restraint to the wine.
Yeah, I think it's one of those wines where you want to sit with a bottle and you really want to savor it and get to know it, because it's not going to immediately jump out of the glass. It's not shouting. It's not in your face. There is always a little bit of restraint and that elegance. And I think also the reality is that it actually needs a bit of time in bottle as well. This is the 2022 version, which is an absolute baby at the moment. I think we work hard on making sure the tannins are nice and approachable, but the reality is these wines probably 10 years in before they really start hitting their straps.
And yet such an important aspect of a wine like this, and you have to be cognizant of the realities of the world. You're selling a fair number of these bottles. 4 out of 5, 5 out of 6 bottles bought today anywhere in the world will be drunk within 24 hours.
Very fine line. I think luckily what the wine world, and not just us, but what we know about tannin management, oxygen management, how we handle things in the cellar, I think we know now how to coax those tannins into a position where they're beautifully nice and fresh, but we've got some really nice lively fruit, but still being approachable, and still 10 years down the line, there's enough substance, there's good acidity levels, good freshness. So the wine, I think, becomes more rewarding with time, but I think that approachability is very crucial in youth. I think I absolutely agree. I think we've got many consumers that would go out tonight and you might save a bottle out of the box for a special occasion, but most of it will be drunk quite young, and I think we need to be cognizant of that fact.
All right, well, let's try a 2022, which I must admit I have had, and quite recently as well, because this has been a year of celebration and I've been lucky enough to be a part of it. When you are approaching this wine, not just as a winemaker, but as a wine lover, what is it when you're drinking it that just gives you that spark and says, yeah, we've got this right?
I think, and that goes through, I think, the entire range of the wines, we're looking for that intensity, the mouthfeel, but that's always coupled with freshness and brightness of fruit. I think, again, it's sort of a testament to the area where you have a little bit almost that sea spray, oyster shell elements on the nose. So I think quality is it's not a discussion, it's not an option. It always has to be at the utmost.
When you have a glass of this, when you're opening it up, and then you set it alongside the wine that your predecessors have made and the wine that began the story that you are now the author of for a period of time, that must be immensely proud, because you are part of this extraordinary journey and you are continuing that journey and being able to take this Meerlust story, this Meerlust Rubicon story, into its next iteration.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a certain responsibility. I think there's an expectation from the market, from consumers. I mentioned earlier about so many clients that we meet where they have a Rubicon special story. I think we very recently, because we're celebrating our 50-year anniversary this year, I had a beautiful lunch with Giorgio, and we spoke about sort of the earlier vintages and what they were doing. And I think we're in a blessed position. I think in terms of technology and research and clonal material and all the things that we've got access to nowadays. But you look back, and we tasted a 75 and a 1980 Rubicon and 75 Cabernet at a recent event now, and it's just absolutely incredible how well those wines hold up. So it often sort of forces you to really look back and think of what they were doing back then, and how those wines have aged and how they are positioned in terms of what we're doing now, and sort of, are we on the right track? I think it's constantly sort of questioning, making sure we're really absolutely paying tribute to this incredible site with what we're doing.
Well, we've had the past, we have had the present. Let's have a look at the future. Back down to the Manor House and a look ahead, because with 50 years in the bank, it's time to see what the next 50 might have in store. So I'm not sure whether to be hugely admiring of Hannes Myburgh or ever slightly so suspicious, because you must be a sociopath to be left alone with a bottle of 1975 while I've been up in the vineyards and not finish it, but very kindly you've left it for us to continue with and to drink back to the wine from this very, very first vintage, and wine which I now feel I'm just a little more acquainted with because I've now spent some time up in the vineyards. I've had a look at the home. Does it still fascinate you, this journey of something that grows so naturally and ends up being something so magnificent in the glass?
Of course it does, it is something that's alive, something that every year is completely different, it's never boring, that's for sure.
And what it means is that every single year is going to be alive and different and changing. And that dynamic between owner and winemaker of getting that sense of what's delivering on the Meerlust name, what's delivering on the Rubicon. How does this relationship work? And is it generally a fairly happy one?
Yes, I'd say.
Well, you heard.
Vim's got his performance review tomorrow.
We're recording this, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a special process because I do think that we understand the legacy, and I think we understand the number of people out there that has an emotional connection to the wine. So I think it's an emotional connection for us as well. I think luckily we get to live with the product for at least a number of months until we sort of coax it into a bottle. I think evaluating the vineyard, tasting the berries, taste sampling the fruit, deciding when to pick. And Hannes is involved from tasting ferments, and we normally have a big allocation tasting once a year where we review every single barrel lot, every single parcel, where we then sort of decide on sort of what the final components look like, and then from there on it's a blending process. So especially on the Rubicon, it spends at least a year as a blend in barrel. So we even get to see it mature as a blend on site in barrel before we put it in a bottle. And I think so when we get to that final decision of actually putting it in a bottle, at least it's not a snap decision. We really get to a point where we fully understand, I think, what the vintage is offering and how that's sort of holding up that sort of the name of Rubicon.
And also what the farm can produce, because I think Wim is learning, as he's been with us since 2020 now, and he's been learning very fast or quickly what the farm, where to plant certain varietals, where not to have certain varietals. So, every winemaker is a bit like a chef, You can give a chef, 5 chefs the same recipe and the same ingredients, and the 5 dishes will be different. So, and I respect that with winemakers. Every winemaker has a different footprint or a thumbprint. But at Meerlust, they have, as long as they remain within the parameters of what we understand Meerlust can produce, the authenticity of Meerlust. That is the essence of Meerlust, what they can bring out. There are parameters that they have to work within. So I think it works out very well, and I'm very happy with all the winemakers who've been here. I mean, we've had Giorgio Dallaccia, who was here for 25 years, Chris Williams was here for 16 years, and Wim hopefully will be here for a hell of a long time. Let's see.
Which in no small part is why a bottle of 1975 wine still has an extraordinary freshness to it, and is still so lively, and is being captured in quite an interesting way in a future generation, because we have the slightly more weather-beaten, more Dan-like bottle to one side, the 1975, and then there's the younger, more chiselled Hannes version just in front of me here. This is the tribute. Tell me about this particular story here.
This is our celebratory wine. It's the 2021 Cabernet Sauvignon. Similar label, very similar to no, not color-wise, but to the design of. We brought this back for the celebratory year, and we're putting it in this tin with a tribute to my father on the tin.
I think all the wine you make in many ways is a tribute to him, but this is a particularly nice illustration of that. And it's part of taking us into the next 50 years, which are about to kick off. For you, as you look at the next 5-10 years, Wim, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I've seen your contract, and you're not allowed to leave for at least the next decade. What excites you about the horizon? What is there still to add to this incredible Meerlust story?
Well, I think looking back and tasting the 1975 Cabernet, and I think looking at what the cellar looked like back then. Georgia literally had 2 big fermentation tanks, and a lot of the Cabernet was planted on the riverbanks. And I think if we look at what we've been able to do in terms of the cellar infrastructure, the research that's been done in terms of our growing conditions, understanding the different terroir units, the different soil. I think we're really optimistic that some of the best Rubicons are still to be made, because we're really fully expressing the uniqueness of the site. And given how incredible the wines of my predecessors are, I think that fills us with a lot of excitement, and that we've got some incredible things to work with in the future.
I have a diary entry in my phone for 2075, where 103-year-old Dan will be joining, I think, 109-year-old Hannes, or thereabouts, and we might invite Wim if he's free that weekend. But I say that partly in jest, but more to suggest that I firmly believe that there is just so much more to come. Already what you've done and produced is terrific. But I say thank you not just for some remarkable wine, and this 75 is one of many Meerlust glasses I've had over the years, but also from a South African industry that has been massively fortunate to have had the Meerlust story as a real anchor in how we've been able to take South African wine to the world. So to you and to your dad and to Giorgio and to Chris and to Wim and the rest of this remarkable team, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much.
There we go.
Cheers,
50 years on. Look, if you come through to Meerlust at all this year, don't come before lunchtime, because they're all recovering from the celebrations the night before. They party every single night here. But you know what? If I was celebrating 50 years of Meerlust and almost 50 years of making Rubicon, not just one of South Africa's great wines, but one of the great red wines of the world, well, I'd be celebrating every night as well. To Meerlust and to 50 years. Cheers.